a lot of the problems we face in nature can be attributed to human stupidity.
He doesn't stop to think that the fence was put up for a reason. No, Nick doesn't stop to think until it's too late.
Oh, he's pissing everywhere.
Let it go, Tonks, let's go.
Get him down, Grabby. Very nice job by Grabby.
And these introduced species are no exception, whether they spread by lack of foresight, by carelessness, or by sheer blunder. These species are now a big problem for us and their non-native habitats.
But friend or foe, we must face one phenomenal fact: their fantastic power to multiply.
These are the world's most invasive species. Hi, I'm Aranya Iyer, and you're watching Animalogic Second Nature. We've covered a lot of highly invasive feral species before, but today we're talking about animals that didn't spread as a result of domestication. Like ferals, these animals and plants were introduced by people to new environments and managed to completely hijack their new ecosystems. Big environmental stories like the invasive Asian carp can be hard to keep track of, and it can be hard to tell when a story is something to be aware of or if it's an outright environmental catastrophe. To understand the bigger picture, I use Ground News, who's sponsoring a portion of today's episode. Ground News is a website and app that gives readers an easy and data-driven objective way to read the news. It combs through over 50,000 news sources from across the political spectrum and allows you to compare headlines with a quick visual breakdown of the political bias, factuality, all backed by ratings from 3 independent news monitoring organizations. We've been following a story with Ground News about a program that uses trackers to follow and control invasive Asian carp populations. I can see that this has been reported on by 36 news outlets, with 56% of the reports being from the center, 28% from left-leaning outlets, and 16% from right-leaning outlets. Most of the headlines are pretty similar, however the content of the articles are quite different. You can also see that 88% of the outlets have high factuality, and you can even see who owns the outlets. I really like their Bias Insights feature, which has made it significantly easier for me to do my research when covering stories like this. In this case, the left-leaning outlets pinpoints the total cost of the program, while the right emphasizes the impossibility of eradicating the carp. With their blind spot feature, you can also see stories that are disproportionately covered by one side of the political spectrum, or that are completely ignored by some outlets. Subscribing through our link supports Animalogic, and also an independent organization that's trying to make the news world more transparent.
I encourage you to go to ground.news/animalogic to get 40% off a Vantage Plan subscription, which is about $5.
And now, back to our reporting on invasive species. An invasive species can be defined as one that is not native to a particular area, but was introduced, and as a result, has caused great environmental or economic harm.
They do have the potential to crowd us off the earth altogether.
Invasive species tend to adapt easily to their new environment, reproduce quickly, and outcompete native species. They can be introduced either as sneaky stowaways, by accident, or on purpose by humans. Let's first take a look at the stowaways. If you've swam in the Great Lakes region of North America, you, or at least your feet, are well familiar with the plague that is the zebra mussel. These foot slicers are native to the Black and Caspian Seas and showed up in North America, attached to the hulls of ships in the late 80s. These ships traveled from the zebra mussel's native home in Eurasia and inadvertently introduced this invasive villain to North America. Zebra mussels are now so prevalent that they threaten native species in the Great Lakes and connected waterways as far-flung as Nevada, California, and Texas. Everything is big in Texas, including zebra mussel populations. Not only do they filter out all the algae that other species need to survive, they will attach and choke out any native mussel species and smother fish spawning grounds. In North America, they have few natural predators, and an environmentally safe way to eradicate them has yet to be discovered, as flamethrowers don't work too well underwater.
Quarantine measures include the thorough inspection and fumigation of incoming ships in order to destroy insect hitchhikers.
The Asian longhorn beetle was another stowaway on shipments destined for Canada in the 1990s. infested wood that had been used as packaging material for cargo made its way to North America, and the beetles found their way to the endemic hardwood trees. A female beetle can lay up to 100 eggs in shallow holes, which it burrows into the bark of maple, poplar, birch, and willow trees. The tunnels they create cut through water and nutrient pathways within the tree, eventually killing the host. Asian longhorn beetles have had a devastating impact on maple trees across the country. After decades of destruction by these beetles, a campaign by the cities of Toronto and Mississauga successfully eradicated the beetles in the region during the summer of 2020. Perhaps the most infamous and destructive stowaways of them all are the brown and black rats, which are generally considered two of the world's most invasive species.
We know that rats are very prolific. They are the most prolific of all mammals. A single pair of rats left to reproduce unhampered would become 1,500 in a year.
Brown and black rats have spread all over the world from Asia as long as seafaring has been a thing, and they thrive wherever humans live. Their high birth rate ensures that populations explode wherever they land, and their omnivorous diet sees them decimating everything from birds, small mammals, invertebrates, plants, and fodder for livestock. Dealing with the rat problem is a toughie, so there are only a few places on Earth that have done it successfully.
And I'll need more men to kill the rats. We want you to hire a crowd. You'll do good work if you hang out this sign that means no rats allowed.
The province of Alberta in Canada is the largest area in the world that is rat-free, thanks to aggressive programs to prevent their invasion. It also helps that they aren't directly connected to any ocean. When they were first discovered moving into Alberta from the east in 1950, laws were introduced that made it the personal responsibility of each person and municipality to prevent the spread of rats. A 600-kilometer-long and 29-kilometer-wide strip of land on the border with Saskatchewan was designated the Rat Control Zone. Pest control inspectors were hired to patrol the zone and sniff out any rats. They threw arsenic and other poisons under every permanent building, sometimes to the detriment of livestock and pets. They even burned infested buildings to the ground. Public education about rats was also a top priority, especially because most Albertans had never even seen a rat before and had no idea what to look for. To this day, it's still illegal to own rats as pets in the province. The efforts to keep rats out has saved the province of Alberta an estimated $1 billion in property damage, livestock loss, human suffering, and healthcare costs. On the other side of the globe, Australia has not been so successful with their invasive stowaways. Northern Pacific sea stars, which are native to, well, the Northern Pacific, inadvertently became one of the 10 most invasive marine species in Australia. They arrived to Australian seas as larval stowaways in the ballasts of transport ships traveling from Asia. Leaving behind their natural competitors, predators, and parasites, they had free rein in Australian waters to start destroying natural habitats with their voracious appetites for anything they can wrap their arms around. And when Northern Pacific sea stars have eaten absolutely everything in sight, they will even turn on their own kind and cannibalize their brethren. While invasive stowaways hitch rides on human-made vessels, many invasive species end up taking over new habitats thanks to sheer human folly. The sea lamprey, a parasitic and truly horrifying fish native to the Atlantic Ocean, managed to make its way up the St. Lawrence River and into Lake Ontario, which has the lowest elevation of the Great Lakes chain at just 74 meters above sea level. These eel-like nightmares have a disc-shaped mouth ringed with sharp teeth surrounding a razor-sharp, rasping tongue, perfect for latching onto their fishy victims. While Lake Ontario was already infested due to its proximity to the St. Lawrence River, Niagara Falls served as the perfect natural barrier to prevent sea lampreys from moving further upstream into other Great Lakes. Improvements to the Welland Canal, which bypasses Niagara Falls, allowed these slippery parasites to get through and access the rest of the Great Lakes, where they have been wreaking havoc ever since. Nutria, also known as koipu, a large and semi-aquatic rodent native to South America, was brought to the US in the late 1800s to be farmed for fur and meat. When interest in eating oversized rodents declined in the 1940s, nutria were introduced both accidentally
and intentionally into local habitats from Washington state to Florida.
Since then, they have been decimating wetland plants and thereby causing mass erosion wherever they set up shop. Their burrowing habits further threaten wetlands, as well as human infrastructure like bridges, culverts, and roadways. And to top it all off, they are hotbeds of parasitic activity.
The roundworms they carry contaminate water supplies, which can cause something called nutria itch, which is probably as horrible as it sounds. But when it comes to human air creating invasive species, the state of Florida prevails as the most blunderous.
This is the story of a visit to a land that knows no winter, the land where the sun reigns.
Human air is the reason green iguanas have taken over Florida, displacing native wildlife. These lizards that are native to Central and South America were inadvertently released into the wild in the 1960s, when these exotic pets got too large for their owners. These lizards can reach upwards of 2 meters long and have cast a dark gloom over the Sunshine State ever since.
We got a runner.
Once they hit 60 centimeters, they basically have no natural predators in Florida. Open season was declared on green iguanas, and they can legally be hunted indiscriminately to keep their numbers down.
Oh. Grabby got him. Get him down, Grabby. Very nice job by Grabby. Another one out of the ecosystem.
Despite Florida's balmy temperatures, iguanas don't do well there. And in the winter, the temperatures drop low enough that the iguanas will freeze to death.
Much like green iguanas, Burmese pythons have overtaken the Florida Everglades due to lack of natural predators.
No, my hands are like greasy. My hands are greasy. His intestines are.
Oh, he's pissing everywhere.
Oh my God.
Nice job, Mom. You're freaking natural.
These 5-meter-long snakes also have a similar origin story. They were brought to the state as exotic pets and released into the wild by irresponsible owners.
It didn't help that in 1992, Hurricane Andrew destroyed a python breeding facility, releasing these snakes into the nearby swamps.
And ever since, they have devastated endemic animal populations, their clashes with alligators being the most terrifying and troubling, as their bouts often result in the death of both animals. Marsh and cottontail rabbits, as well as foxes, are effectively gone, and opossum, raccoon, and bobcat populations have almost completely disappeared.
Next in line to take over the Everglades seems to be the Nile crocodile. This African species, that kills 200 people a year in their native habitat, has been showing up in Florida too. As usual, exotic pet owners are likely to blame for the unexpected appearance of another crocodilian in Floridian swamps.
The sport of wrestling finds its way into the Everglades. Tommy Clark is carrying his opponent with him. Whether you can see him or not, he's there.
Let me at him.
But it's not just exotic reptiles that have taken over Florida. This state also has a primate problem. And no, I'm not talking about humans. Well, them too.
Rhesus macaques, which are native to Asia, from China to Afghanistan, have been monkeying around in Florida since the 1930s and 40s.
It was at this time that the owner of a glass-bottomed boat company released a dozen of these monkeys in the Silver Springs Park area to boost his business. Their population soon ballooned to the hundreds and saw them destroying vegetation and even increasing levels of E. coli in the surrounding water. Yuck. Perhaps the most famous of all the exotic pets turned invasive species are the so-called cocaine hippos of Colombia.
These hippos were imported and released into a zoo in Colombia by Pablo Escobar in the 1980s. What he didn't realize was that his zoo was connected to a larger river system, and soon the hippos escaped and began to reproduce.
You can check out that wild story in the full episode here. Now, let's talk about the ill-advised species that were released on purpose by humans with little or no foresight into how that would actually turn out.
Many of our enemies multiply disproportionately when we disturb the natural balance in order to advance our civilization.
Many of these species were introduced as pest control and then got out of hand themselves. An example of this would be cane toads that were brought to Australia in the 1930s to manage populations of beetles that were attacking sugarcane crops.
And eat the beetles they did, along with a whole lot of other native insects, other frogs, and even bird eggs. Being poisonous ensures that they have no natural predators to keep their populations in check.
We have destroyed the natural habitats of the predatory animals who might prey on the invaders.
Coconut palms are another non-native invader of Australian shorelines.
These trees push out native vegetation and don't offer the same protection that tangled rainforest trees do during storms. Their tall trunks also leave the ground below exposed to erosion. Kudzu, a creeping vine that chokes out the plants it overtakes, was gifted by Japan to the United States at the 1876 Centennial Exposition in Philadelphia. Since then, it's been known as the vine that ate the South for reasons that become apparent the second you see it.
Another misguided attempt at dealing with an invasive species led the islands of Hawaii to be overrun with mongoose, of all things.
Introduced in the 1880s by the sugarcane industry to control the invasive rat population, mongoose do indeed gobble up many a rat. But they also unfortunately love the native insects, animals, and birds the islands have to offer, which crashed many local populations.
While we often talk about all the invasive species that have overtaken Australia, there are a few Australian species that have become invasive elsewhere too.
Like the brush-tailed possum, which was first introduced to New Zealand by European settlers looking for a wild source of food and fur in the 1850s. 150 years later, these bovine tuberculosis-carrying possums number in the tens of millions in New Zealand.
So whether we did it by accident, through carelessness, or on poorly planned purpose, invasive species are 100% a human-created problem. We have conquered every corner of the globe, and in our wake is havoc that we can only hope to correct. Just not by throwing another animal at it.
Grabby got him. Get him down, Grabby. Very nice job by Grabby.
What should we talk about next? Please let me know in the comments and be sure to subscribe for new episodes every week. Thanks for watching. See ya!